Hello, everyone. My name is David Needham. I'm a developer advocate at Pantheon. Let me start just by asking a question. Who here makes mistakes? Just raise your hand. All right. So for those of you who are streaming live, or for those of you who might be in the future watching this as a recording, you should know that almost everyone in the room raised their hand. All right, if you did not raise your hand, you should probably just leave, because this is not the session for you. We're going to learn a little bit about if you make mistakes, how can you find them? Maybe it's not even a mistake that you made. Yeah, well, when I am not working for Pantheon, I sometimes do some volunteer work. I work specifically with a documentary, a World War II documentary about telling the stories of the people of France during the invasion of Normandy. In fact, if you are from Normandy, France, or if you were there for the D-Day celebrations, they just premiered, they had their screening of the film for the first time. Well, I volunteer as the webmaster for this documentary, and I was scrolling around the website, and at the bottom we have this subscribe to our newsletter section. It's MailChimp, I knew that, but I hadn't built the website myself. Someone else built it, and I inherited it, and one day when I was scrolling around, it was gone. I have no idea why it was gone. I started looking through, started figuring out what plugins, I didn't see a MailChimp plugin. I didn't see any shortcodes or anything that could be embedding it in that section. 2 hours go by. Again, I didn't create the site, so I didn't know where to look, but I kept going, I kept trying. 3 hours later, still have no idea why it's not working. Eventually, I do solve the problem. I figured out what was going on. But if I had been using Git Bisect, this would have been much faster. Let me show you with a quick demonstration. So we're assuming here that you have Git, that you're using Git already for version control. If you do, you already have Git Bisect included. It's just one of those obscure commands that most people don't already know about. I'm going to be simulating a scenario to recreate what could have happened if I had been using Git Bisect instead of manually trying to solve the problem that I had made. I have a sort of simulated terminal window here at the bottom, so you can see the prompt right there. And then what we see here is a list of commits. Again, in a simulation, let's say we have 100 commits. We have commit number 1 all the way through to head, which is where I'm at right now, all the changes I've made in my current history. Well, if we start just by running git bisect start, we can start by, after that, saying which commit is bad. And in this case, if our current website, where it is right now, is bad, all we have to do is say git bisect bad. From there, we say what was good. So if we knew it was working way back in commit number 1, then we say git bisect good, followed by some sort of identifier. So in this case, if we gave the hash for commit number 1, or if we had a tag, or even a branch, all of those would identify a point in time in which this was working correctly. From there, Git Bisect takes it away. It says bisecting. It says 98 revisions left to test. So there's roughly 98 commits between the first one and the last one that it could be responsible for this problem. And it says we're going to solve this in roughly 6 steps. So in about 6 guesses, we're going to figure out which of these 100 commits is responsible for introducing this bug. All right, so it starts halfway through. It checks out commit number 50. And at this point, because I'm using WordPress, because I'm using a content management system, I can't just use the code. I also have to check out a backup of the database. I put the backup in there, and I kind of check to make sure. And as it turns out, the commit number 50 was good. It was working. The newsletter sign-up existed in commit number 50. So I say git bisect good, and because we know commit number 50 is good, it meant all of the commits between the original good one and 50 was good. So we have already ruled out 50 of the commits. We're that much closer to finding the ones responsible. So then it keeps going. It says, okay, we have 49 revisions left to test. We have about 5 more steps to go. And it picks another one about halfway between the two. It picks number 75. We say, well, this one's bad. We looked at it. The newsletter is missing. We type in git bisect bad, and it continues on its way. We can assume that all of them between 75 and where we were starting at is bad, so it marks them all as bad, and it continues on its way. And from there, it just keeps going. We can say, well, 62 is good, so it gets further narrowing down the scope over and over. As we answer these questions, we check out these commits, and we check to see if it's actually working or not. Well, eventually, we get down to one commit. And at this point, is this going to be good or bad? Number 74, if it is good, that means the responsible commit is number 75. If number 74 is bad, if it's not working, it means we introduced the bug in 74. Well, as it turns out, this one was bad, so we say git bisect bad. And at this point, it says, okay, well, we know which commit is responsible, and it shows you information about it. And as it turns out, it shows it says this particular commit is the first bad commit. And it says, hey, by the way, you made that commit. Yeah, I'm not surprised. And if you take a look at the commit message, which actually isn't visible on the screen here because the captioning is covering it up, but the commit message with this, which might have been giving it away, was removing plugins that aren't used. Yeah, so I'm like, okay, well, I read this and I'm like, oh, right. I was doing some house cleaning on the site. I remember I didn't create it myself, and I was going through and removing plugins and some themes that were never used as far as I was aware. And as it turns out, one of them was being used. Okay, so no biggie. I'm like, okay, so it's this commit. I type in git bisect reset to take me back to where I was before I ran git bisect. And now I know where to start. I can go in, look at the code that was changed in that commit, and either do a revert, or I can go get that plugin and download it again, and I'm back and running. And I could do this, and this is basically real time. There's no like processing or waiting for a loading screen or anything. The process we just went through would have saved me 3 hours. That's pretty huge. There's some things I learned along the way. I first heard about this talk at WordCamp US, and there's some great tips that I've picked up. Specifically, if you want to save a little bit of time, we broke out the commands for clarity between the git bisect start, git bisect good, git bisect bad, but you can put them all in one command. Also, if you know where the problem happened, like for example, if you think the problem was with your CSS, maybe it happened in your theme, so you could say git bisect start and then give a path to your theme. It will actually reduce the number of options. It'll look at your history and tell you, instead of 100 commits, only about 30 of those are in the theme, so those are how many we're sorting through. And then if you've ever made a commit that has accidentally introduced maybe a white screen of death, if you've ever introduced a commit that has broken your site for other reasons, well, what happens if git bisect is going along and it checks out that commit and it says, hey, is the site working now? Well, if it's a white screen of death, if it's not working for other reasons, you don't know if it was broken. So you can type in git bisect skip, and it will pick a different revision, a different commit to pull from, so you can kind of continue on your way. Also, it is really helpful to know that you could do a local. If you have a local environment, this would, of course, speed this up dramatically as well versus kind of doing something remote. And then, of course, we can also automate this a little bit. So if you don't want to have to type in git bisect good, git bisect bad, and especially if you have hundreds or thousands of commits to sort through, it can be really difficult. You can write a test. So you can just write, in this case, we're doing just a simple bash script. So git bisect run, followed by this bash script I wrote, which is literally just looking to see, is there a file named mycode.php, and is there a myImportant function located anywhere inside of that? Again, very, very simple bash script, but it's not important. Any sort of bash script that you could write could fit in that, and it would work. Really, what it's looking for is an error code. Error code 1, error code 0. It will use that to answer those questions so that you don't have to answer git bisect good or bad every time. It will continually go through, run this test every time, and you won't have to do it manually. So that's just a simple bash script, but it can get a little bit more interesting. You could also provide some PHP. And if we take a look at John Blackbourne's presentation from WordCamp US, which I have a link to here in my slides, he actually has a great scenario where he bootstraps WordPress. He renders his menu system, and he checks to see if a particular link is in his menu at the top of the page. If it is, he knows that it's working, and he uses exit code 0 or 1 to say pass or fail, good or bad. But of course, if you're using other sorts of testing, like backstop, for example, visual regression testing, you can do that. The important thing is really just the pass-fail. And then if you're using bhat or really anything else, anything you can imagine that you could do testing with, you'd be able to include that. And of course, the thing that's most helpful here is in situations where you don't know when a commit happened or who did it, that's the best situation for using Git Bisect. But also, in an automation mindset, you could include this as part of a build step. You can include this as part of compiling your site. On every pull request, do a quick verification that the site's still working the way I expect it to. There are lots of resources on my slides. You can get those at davidneedham.me/WCUS 2019. And thank you all very much.